Weddings are supposed to be about beginnings, new chapters, fresh promises. But the thing no one tells you is that sometimes they reveal the endings too. That night in Scottsdale, under the soft glow of sunset, I didn't just get married, I got clarity. Everything looked perfect on the surface. White chairs lined in symmetry, a string quartet playing something classical that no one really paid attention to, and guests swirling Prosecco with polite laughter. I'd picked this venue for its simplicity, minimalist decor, soft linens, no flash. I wanted elegance, not extravagance. We weren't trying to impress anyone, just mark a moment. I stood near the patio archway, watching the staff begin to roll out the cake. 3 tiers of white and gold, trimmed with sugar roses. It was the one indulgence I allowed myself. $5,000 of detail and symbolism. No one chipped in, not Mom, not Dad, especially not Avon. She hadn't RSVP'd until 2 days ago. Typical. She always arrived late, fashionably, as she called it, demanding attention just by existing. She didn't bring a gift, didn't congratulate me. She walked in like she owned the damn view. Her heels clicked against the stone pathway, hair still damp like she couldn't bother drying it before showing up. Phone in hand, she was live streaming as she came, narrating to her followers about how extra wedding cakes had become. My name barely passed her lips. I watched her make her way toward the cake. She leaned into the table, elbow propped up like it was a bar at some rooftop lounge. She adjusted an earring, probably her phone angle really, and her elbow nudged forward. The cake wobbled, then leaned. A gasp escaped from someone behind me. The second tier slid first, then the whole structure collapsed in slow motion. Frosting slapped the ground. Silence followed, and then Avon laughed. "Just a cheap cake, right?" she said, smiling into her phone like she'd dropped a napkin instead of the centerpiece of someone else's wedding. People stared at me. Some tried not to. One woman whispered to her husband, another reached out like she was going to try and help. No one actually did. My dress had frosting on the hem and I hadn't moved an inch. Then I heard it. "She's just being playful," my mother's voice said softly from beside me. "Don't be so stiff on your big day." I turned to look at her. She didn't look concerned. Glass of Prosecco in hand, she wore that same smile she always wore when Avon did something out of line, the one that said, "You know how she is." I waited for her to say more, maybe an apology, maybe some semblance of disappointment, but she didn't. She just sipped her drink and scanned the crowd like nothing had happened. My father didn't look up from his seat, not once. And just like that, the memory locked into place. This wasn't new. This wasn't surprising. It was just louder this time. I remembered being 9 years old. Avon had cried during a board game and accused me of cheating. I hadn't. I was grounded anyway. "She's younger," Mom had said. "She's sensitive." I'd learned that day that silence was easier than truth. I'd stayed silent through a lot since then. But something about watching my cake hit the ground while my mother excused it and my sister smiled for the internet. It unlocked a door I hadn't opened in years. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't run off. I just walked. I stepped away from the patio, across the lawn, into the service hallway near the kitchen. I could still hear Avon giggling with someone, her voice too loud, her jokes landing like daggers for anyone paying attention. I needed a moment, not to breathe. Breathing was fine, not to calm down. I wasn't angry. I was clear. Clarity feels cold when it first hits. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Not at my dress or the frosting on it, but at my eyes. Still. Focused. Awake in a way I hadn't been in years. Someone opened the door at the far end of the hallway. Light spilled in. Music drifted through from the reception. I straightened up. When I walked back out, Avon was posing again. Her phone was angled high. The lighting was just right. Her followers would see a woman framed in golden light and smiling like she belonged. She waved toward the camera, the same hand that had tipped the cake. The frosting was still on her hand. I saw it when she waved at the camera. The frosting had dried on my wrist by the time I reached the dressing tent, clinging like a reminder I didn't ask for. I closed the door behind me and let the silence settle for a moment. It was the kind of quiet that didn't comfort, it accused, as if the room itself had questions I wasn't ready to answer. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, more out of habit than purpose. Dozens of notifications filled the screen. Tags, texts, mentions I didn't care to read, but one alert caught my eye. A live stream from my cousin Meg's feed. Avon was tagged. Curious despite myself, I tapped it open. There she was, framed perfectly in portrait mode, standing by the pile of ruined cake like it was a prop in some tragicomic performance. Guess she didn't want me stealing the show, Avon said, smiling. So I took the cake down instead. Laughter erupted in the background. Comment bubbles rolled across the screen. Queen behavior. Iconic. You ate that. My fingers froze around the phone. My stomach didn't drop. It folded. I hadn't cried when the cake fell, but watching the aftermath framed for applause, that felt worse, like she wasn't content with ruining it. She needed the laugh track too. When the world laughs with the person who humiliated you, I thought, silence stops being peace. It becomes exile. I clicked off the feed and set the phone down on the makeup counter, next to a half-empty bottle of setting spray I hadn't used. I needed air, but I couldn't bring myself to walk out through the main entrance. Instead, I slipped out the side of the tent and onto a quiet path that looped behind the venue. The sun had dipped lower, casting shadows long and golden. I leaned against a garden post, breathing in deep. That's when the event coordinator approached. She looked unsure, clutching a clipboard, eyes darting nervously like she wasn't sure she should bother me. "Sorry, Mrs. Halloway," she said. "There was a little issue with the seating chart. The card for your seat at the head table. It got printed wrong." She handed it to me. Supporter of the bride, not bride. I stared at the card. Supporter looked so clinical, so detached. I tried to picture how many guests had glanced at that and quietly wondered if I was just some wedding planner in white. "I think it was submitted that way from the design file," the coordinator added quickly. "Probably just a mistake from whoever finalized the cards." I knew who finalized the cards, Avon's assistant. "Thanks," I said, folding the card in half slowly. "No worries." But it wasn't just the card. Someone earlier had asked me where the restrooms were, assuming I worked the event. Another had complimented Avon on pulling off such a tasteful wedding. She didn't correct them. She never corrected anyone. I walked back toward the tent, passing a decorative mirror leaned against a tree, part of the photo booth setup. My reflection looked fine, intact, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been slowly disappearing all evening. Erased not with cruelty, but with paperwork, with comments, with omission. And I'd let it happen. That realization bit deep. In the distance, I could hear the click of camera shutters. When I rounded the corner, I saw Avon standing with the photographer and a small group of her friends, posing dramatically beside the cake wreckage. "Let's do it one more time," she laughed. "Like I'm actually knocking it over again. Yes, right there." The photographer adjusted his lens and nodded. I moved closer, just enough to catch the apology in his eyes before he spoke to me directly. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I hope you don't mind, but your sister requested we limit the solo shots of you. Said you preferred candids." My lips parted. "Oh," I said. "Sure." He gave a half smile, then went back to adjusting the lighting. I stepped back, behind the crowd now, hidden again in plain sight. I wasn't surprised. Years ago, at my high school graduation, Avon had worn my valedictorian sash for pictures, said it matched her dress. I'd said nothing. I thought it was harmless. Back then, I believed letting her shine wouldn't dim me. I didn't know she was polishing her spotlight with pieces of mine. It wasn't the cake, not really. It was what it symbolized. How easily she could claim space that wasn't hers. How quickly the people around us would laugh and follow along. Some people only love the version of you that lets them feel superior. That was the moment I knew. She hadn't ruined my cake. She'd rehearsed it. I didn't walk. I drifted. My body moved, but my mind felt jammed in the moment Avon tipped the cake. Even as the frosting dried along the folds of my dress, I wasn't thinking about fabric or stains. I was thinking about how fast everything had unraveled, how loud her laughter had been, and how quiet everyone else was. The dressing tent offered the illusion of privacy. I stepped inside, exhaled, and let the flap fall behind me. The string lights inside buzzed faintly. My heels clicked against the wooden floor as I sat in front of the vanity. My fingers, out of muscle memory, reached for my phone. I didn't want to see what people were saying, but I couldn't stop myself. I had just tapped the screen when a notification lit up. Meg is live. Avon is tagged. I shouldn't have opened it. The video buffered for a second. Then there she was, Avon, standing beside what used to be my wedding cake. She reenacted the moment in slow motion, mimicking the elbow nudge, then pretending to gasp and laugh dramatically. "Oops," she said into the camera. "Guess she didn't want to share the stage, so I helped." Laughter burst off screen. Comments flew past. Iconic. She ate that. Queen energy. Typical bridezilla reaction incoming. I set the phone down. My hands felt cold. I wasn't surprised she did it. I was surprised how many people applauded. The door of the tent cracked open a few minutes later. I turned instinctively, but didn't get up. A young staffer peeked in, holding a clipboard and a single name card. "Hi, Mrs. Holloway. I just wanted to drop this off. There was a mix-up at the bridal table." I took the card from her. It read, "Supporter of the bride." Not bride. Not even my name. She stammered, "I think your sister's assistant uploaded the final layout." "It must have been. It's fine," I said quietly, folding the card in half and placing it next to the phone I no longer wanted to look at. "Thanks." When she left, I sat back in the chair and stared at my reflection. That card wasn't an accident. It wasn't even the first time. At my high school graduation, Avon wore my valedictorian sash for photos because it matched her dress. That day, she said she'd only borrow it for a minute. That minute lasted all afternoon. I didn't fight her on it. She looked good in photos, and I told myself the spotlight had room for both of us. Turns out, it didn't. A knock interrupted the silence again. This time, it was the photographer. His face was polite but uncertain. "Hey," he started. "Just a heads up. Your sister asked us to stick with candid shots for you. She said you weren't really into posing." I blinked. "She said that?" "Yeah," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "We can adjust if you want." I waved it off, even managed a smile. "No, it's fine." But it wasn't. I walked out the side of the tent, toward the edge of the lawn where the lighting was softer. From there, I could see the main area. Avon stood in the center, flanked by friends, holding a mini cake someone had salvaged from the wreckage. They were laughing again. One of them handed her a phone and she raised the cake like a trophy, mock posing like a Miss America winner. "I thought the younger one was the bride," someone whispered near the bar. "She's so much more photogenic." I didn't turn to see who said it, I just kept walking. There's a special kind of pain in being invisible at your own wedding. I've survived misunderstandings before. People misinterpreting my tone, assuming I was cold or too serious, that I could stomach. But being erased, that scrapes something deeper, that rewrites you before you even realize you've been edited out. I thought about all the moments I'd chosen not to correct the narrative. When Avon claimed credit for the centerpieces, when she called the wedding our aesthetic, when she invited friends I hadn't even met. Each silence was a permission slip I handed out freely. But this was different. As I watched her take another selfie with my guests and another bite out of the stolen spotlight, a thought solidified in my chest like a knot tying itself shut. You can't steal the show if someone hands it to you, but you can pretend you earned it. The morning after the wedding, I woke up earlier than I meant to. The sun hadn't broken through the blinds yet, but I could feel the weight of the day ahead pressing on my chest. Next to me, Ben was still asleep. His breathing steady, face turned toward the wall. I lay there for a while, counting the seconds between each breath like it was some kind of tether keeping me in the room. By the time I sat at the small writing desk in our suite, the light had turned soft and amber. I pulled open my laptop, more out of instinct than necessity. The cake was old news already online, reduced to a meme in wedding TikTok circles. But I wasn't checking for likes. I logged into the shared account I'd set up for Mom 2 years ago, a small trust fund to help her settle into retirement after Dad's health had started to falter. I managed it quietly, no fanfare, no thanks, just something I did because I was supposed to. Except something was different. There was a new name listed under Account Access, Co-Manager Privileges, Avon. My stomach clenched. I checked the logs. The change had been made 3 days ago, while I was finalizing the seating chart, while I was proofing vows. No one had told me. I stared at the screen, then reached for my phone. I texted Ben, even though he was only 10 feet away. Did you know Avon was added to Mom's trust? He didn't respond immediately. When he did, he sat up in bed and rubbed his eyes. She mentioned it, said Mom asked her to help with the digital stuff. I turned to face him fully. So you knew? It didn't seem like a big deal, El, he said, yawning. It's just a tech update. You've always said she's better with that. I blinked at him. You really think that's what this is? He shrugged. I think maybe you're being too sensitive. It's not that deep. There it was. Not that deep. The 4 words that always follow a woman when her boundaries are laughed off. I didn't answer. Well, I just turned back to the screen, rereading the access logs like I was looking for an error that would make this all feel accidental. Later that afternoon, we met my parents for brunch. A quiet patio, mimosas, the kind of setting meant to signal reset without anyone apologizing for anything. Malis was already seated when we arrived, flipping through the menu like nothing had happened the night before. I waited until the server walked away before I spoke. Why didn't you tell me Avon was added to the trust? She didn't look up. It's not a big deal, sweetheart. She's just helping. I kept my voice low. But I managed that account. You and I set that up together. Malis sipped her drink. You've been so busy, it just made sense. Avon has more time. Ben stayed quiet beside me. I could feel him exhaling slowly, like he was bracing for a reaction, the kind I wasn't going to give. I looked at my mother again. She didn't ask me. And you didn't either. Now she looked at me, calm, controlled. You're always so tense. I didn't want to make a thing of it. We don't need drama, Elowen. I almost laughed. Drama. She didn't say a word when Avon ruined my cake, but suddenly I was the source of drama for protecting the thing I built. I leaned back in my chair and let the conversation move on without me. They started talking about an article in the local paper about someone they knew who'd retired to Prescott. I nodded when appropriate, smiled when it seemed expected. But inside, I was drawing a list, passwords I needed to change, accounts to review, contacts to remove. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. When someone repeatedly violates your boundaries, it's not love, it's strategy. That evening, after we returned to the suite, Ben went to meet a friend for drinks. I said I was tired. Truth was, I needed the quiet. I drove across town to a bank branch I hadn't visited in over a year. It felt safer there, farther from the fingerprints of my family. I sat in the car for a while before going in. Opened my laptop. Pulled up the account again. Her name was still there. Hovering over the remove user option, I felt the air around me still. This wasn't spite. It was self-preservation. This time, I won't ask for permission to reclaim what's mine. When you've been minimized long enough, you start to move differently. You don't announce it. You just stop offering explanations. After I'd revoked Avon's access to the trust account, I felt something subtle shift. Not in them, my family, but in me. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to justify the boundary I'd drawn. I didn't call Mom. I didn't loop in Ben. I just acted. That clarity carried into everything. I began sorting through old emails, receipts, digital logs, things I'd never given much thought to because they'd always been handled without fanfare. Now, I wanted a paper trail. Not for them. For me. I needed to know what else had been touched. That's when I found it. A forwarded email from my aunt, Carla. It had been meant for someone else, probably her daughter, but landed in my inbox by accident. The thread contained a message from Mom, dated 2 weeks before the wedding. Elowen's always been dramatic, she wrote. She's only doing this wedding thing to prove she can keep up. No real connection there. I stared at the sentence, letting it sink its teeth into whatever softness was left in me. That email didn't break my heart. It confirmed I was never in the room when they defined it. The words didn't surprise me. What shook me was how comfortable she was saying them out loud, on paper. It was one thing to be dismissed privately. It was another to watch your own mother assign you motives like a character she didn't care to understand. I closed the email and exhaled. No shaking, no tears, just a list growing longer in my mind. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat down at the dining table to open thank you cards. Most were standard, sweet notes from guests who loved the venue, the ceremony, the view. And then I opened the box from the post-wedding pile. Avon's name was written in loopy cursive across the tag on a porcelain tea set. The note inside read, "For Elowen, for all your quiet strength, D." It wasn't from Avon. I knew exactly who D was. Doris Blake, my mentor from my early nonprofit work days. She had been more of a mother to me in the short years we worked together than Malis had ever tried to be. I picked up the phone and called Doris directly. She answered on the second ring. "Elowen, I've been waiting to hear from you. Did it arrive safely?" "It did," I said. "But it had Avon's name on it." A beat of silence. "Oh dear, that's not what I asked them to do. I addressed the shipping form myself." I thanked her, kept my voice steady, and hung up. It was just a name card. But it wasn't. I took a photo of the note and the box and texted it to Avon. "You didn't think I'd check?" She replied almost instantly. "It was just a name card. You're blowing things up again. God, this is why people stop talking to you." I stared at her message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I thought of every time I'd let something like this slide, every dinner I bit my tongue through, every event I invited her to, hoping this time she'd show up as someone new. She never did, but I had. Politeness is no longer protection. It's a muzzle. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That night, I updated my will, changed the login credentials to every shared account I'd ever linked to my family, replaced cloud access, canceled auto-renewals to shared services. Then I opened the glass cabinet in my dining room and placed the tea set inside, my name etched on the plate beneath it. That tea set wasn't about value. It was about being seen, and I wasn't going to let someone else steal that light anymore. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not to impress, to declare. Soft beige suit, no makeup, hair pulled back, just presence. I walked into the brunch like someone who didn't owe the room anything. Avon was already there, laughing too loudly with a group of cousins who always chose the louder side of any story. When she looked up and saw me, her laughter faltered. They didn't notice I was gone, but they'll remember I showed up different. By the time I walked back through my front door, the brunch already felt like a month ago. My suit jacket still smelled faintly of citrus and Chanel, leftover from Aunt Carla's awkward kiss on the cheek and the mimosa she spilled trying to hug me. I didn't bother to change. I went straight to the den, pulled the blinds halfway down, and opened the folder labeled Proof. Not because I needed to remind myself, but because I was tired of pretending these files didn't exist. The folder was simple, tidy. A decade's worth of digital documentation, screenshots of transfers to Avon's accounts, PDF invoices for flights booked under my name, scholarship appeal letters I ghost wrote for her, rent deposits, car down payments, even a dental bill I paid in cash when she said she wasn't comfortable having it go through insurance. I didn't open every file. I didn't need to. This wasn't rage. This was arithmetic. They always said I was the logical one, cold, calculating even. Funny how those traits only became flaws when I used them to draw a boundary. Silence had been their cover for years, but this time, I brought flashlights. I was halfway through sorting a subfolder when my phone buzzed. Voicemail. From a number I hadn't saved in years. Sable. I hadn't spoken to her since she moved to Portland. She'd been a bridesmaid in 2 of our cousins' weddings. Not mine. We hadn't fallen out exactly, just faded. I hit play. "Hey, Elle. I know it's been a while, but I saw the video, the cake, the caption. I don't know what Avon's trying to do, but it's not okay. I was there when you covered her rent for 3 months straight. I remember the grocery lists you used to type for her when she got laid off. She's spinning the story again, but this time, people are watching. I played the message twice, not because I needed confirmation, but because it felt like the first time someone else said out loud that they saw it too. A single voice of truth can echo louder than 1,000 laughs built on lies. The next morning, I emailed our family attorney and requested full removal of my name from every shared financial document still active. House, car titles, trust oversight, everything. That same afternoon, I called my accountant, told him to freeze any pending transactions linked to family accounts. Just for now, I said, but we both knew it was permanent. Then I opened the shared drive my parents had once dubbed Family Plans. I hovered for a second. That folder had vacation photos, college applications I edited, even the PowerPoint I designed for Dad's retirement party. None of it had ever been credited to me. I deleted the folder. No announcement, no farewell email, just click, gone. Later that week, I showed up at my cousin Jordan's birthday cookout. I wore jeans, hair tied back, a simple black tee. No performance, no explanation. Avon was already there, of course, bright red dress, gold heels, phone in hand like it was part of her wrist. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter. She was always good at pretending she didn't know she'd been caught. Someone handed her a beer, and she raised it like a toast. To the infamous cake saga, she laughed. At least we can say it was memorable. Everyone chuckled politely. Except me. I set my phone down on the picnic table. The screen was still lit, one of the receipts open in full view. Avon glanced at it, mid-sip. Her fingers tightened just slightly around the bottle. The laughter quieted. Not fully, but enough. Later that night, when I got home, there was a message waiting, encrypted, from my lawyer. It's done. You're clear. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, barefoot in my kitchen, reading it over and over like it was the end of a novel I'd written quietly, one boundary at a time. I didn't burn the bridge. I just moved the river. I should have known the silence wouldn't last. Peace never lingers when liars have platforms. 3 days after the legal paperwork was finalized, my phone started buzzing again, not from lawyers or accountants this time, but from coworkers, high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, and even my neighbor across the hall. They were all sending the same video, a TikTok posted by Avon. She sat on a tufted cream couch, filtered lighting softening her features. Her voice trembled just enough. I'm heartbroken, she said to the camera. I only ever wanted to support her, but some people would rather erase family than forgive. I mean, she cut me off financially and then pretended it was healing. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your sister has decided you're a liability. The caption read, when your own sister sabotages your housing and calls it healing. It wasn't a tantrum. It was her debut monologue. The comments were predictable. Ugh, sisters are the worst. She's jealous, clearly. But tucked between those were the cracks, people asking why Avon never addressed the cake, others pulling screenshots from her older posts. One even posted side-by-sides of our family photos, pointing out how I'd quietly disappeared from her feed a year ago. The tide wasn't fully turning, but it was shifting, and I didn't need to shout to ride it. That weekend, we attended our cousin Kara's engagement party. It was the usual blend of overdone desserts, disposable champagne flutes, and secondhand gossip. I kept to the side, nursing my drink and trying not to make eye contact with anyone who looked too curious. Then I heard Kara tap her glass. We'd like a few words from someone who really represents what family means to us, she smiled. Avon, would you say something? Of course. Avon stood, dress flawless, smile trained. She started slow, the way someone does when they've rehearsed it more than once. Family is complicated, she said. We don't always agree, but we love, we forgive, we show up, and even when some of us walk away. She glanced in my direction, just once. We pray they find peace. Applause followed. I didn't move. I didn't need a microphone. My silence was louder than her stage. The next morning, I posted a single photo, a scanned receipt, my name, Avon's address, a $200 transfer for her security deposit. The caption, "I never left. I simply stopped funding fiction." It took 10 minutes for the comments to light up. Within an hour, someone linked it to her wedding cake stunt, then her car lease, then her internship I had secured through a friend she later ghosted. "If someone cuts you out of the story," I typed, "tell your version in footnotes. The truth will annotate itself." That night, Malis called. "Do you have to be so cold?" she asked. "You know how Avon is. You've always been the strong one." I stared out the window. "I'm not being cold." "And I'm being accurate," she paused. "You know your father doesn't like tension." I stopped liking silence. The call ended there. I didn't redial. Neither did she. Later, as I cleared dishes and shut off lights, my phone pinged. A new message. No name, just a line. "I think you should see this. It wasn't all Avon." I froze. Even shadows leave a trail if you know where to look. The driveway was already full when I pulled up. Extra cars lined the curb like it was a holiday, not that anyone would admit they were assembling for damage control. Malis had sent the group text 2 days earlier with her usual overly cheerful tone. "Let's gather, reconnect, and move forward together." She never could send a message without an emoji to soften the manipulation. I knew exactly what this was. Spin. By the time I stepped through the door, the living room buzzed with forced politeness. Cousins passed casseroles. Someone had brought store-bought fruit tarts and arranged them like a peace offering. Malis stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine and playing host like she was welcoming dignitaries. Avon floated around the room in a soft pink wrap dress, like innocence sewn into chiffon. I didn't speak to anyone, just smiled the way people expect a woman to smile when she knows more than she says. About 20 minutes in, while Malis launched into a gentle sermon about how time and perspective heal all wounds, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I stepped into the hallway. A message had arrived. No name, no context, just a video file. It played immediately. Avon. Wedding rehearsal. Hair curled, glass of champagne in hand, talking to someone just off camera. Laughing casually, not a care in the world. "It's not like she didn't deserve a little shake-up," she said. "That cake's gonna be Instagram history." My breath slowed, sharpened. It had never been clumsiness. It wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It was design. A performance, staged with timing and delivery. So it was never an accident. It was her masterpiece. I returned to the living room, lifted the remote off the coffee table, and pressed a button. The smart TV blinked on. I tapped AirDrop, selected Family Room TV. Within seconds, Avon's face appeared on the screen. Everyone turned. The video played in full, uncensored, no captions, just her voice, her smirk, her confession. Silence followed like an avalanche. Then came another video. A short toast from the wedding night, filmed on someone's phone and never meant to see daylight. Malis. "Well, at least the cake part was funny." Astria. "She'll get over it. She always does." I let it run its full 10 seconds before speaking. "This is the moment," I said calmly, "that I stopped being your cleanup crew." Avon froze, jaw tightening. She glanced at Malis, who had turned ghost white. No one moved. "It was never about hurting you," Malis finally stammered. "It was just, family things get messy." "No," I said. "Messy is an accident. This was choreography." Avon grabbed her purse and stormed out. Her heels hit the tile like punctuation. The rest stayed seated, unsure of what to do next. I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. I just turned, walked to the door, and let it close behind me with the kind of finality no apology could ever chase. In the car, I sat still for a moment, heart steady. I opened the family group chat, scrolled up to the first message, some birthday announcement from 5 years ago, and hit delete. Sometimes you don't walk away to end the chaos. You walk away to end your participation in it. Just as I put the car in drive, my phone buzzed again. Another message, no contact name. "There's more you haven't seen? This goes deeper than Avon." And just like that, the truth wasn't just personal, it was systemic. I thought the worst was behind me. After the videos played in that living room, After Avon stormed out, after Malis couldn't string together a sentence without tripping over her guilt, I thought that was the crack in the dam. But the next message reminded me. Some betrayals are deeper than embarrassment. They're embedded in paper, hidden in signatures. The message came at 10:23 the next morning. Same unknown number. One line, one link. You missed this. Look closer. I clicked. A PDF opened. Property records. A modest plot of land outside Sedona. I knew the coordinates by heart. Grandma's retreat. The place she always said would be mine one day. The place I used to daydream about building a little studio, writing full-time, watching sunsets without having to translate myself for anyone. Except the name on the deed wasn't mine. 6 months ago, the title was transferred to Avon. The document cited a power of attorney clause. One I vaguely remembered signing years earlier when Mom had insisted she needed it for hospital paperwork in case anything ever happened. I hadn't read the fine print. I was 28, naive, and trying to be helpful. Now it had erased me from the only piece of legacy that ever felt like it belonged to me. They didn't just forget me. They rewrote the deed to make sure I never existed in it. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I just sat there, thinking about how silence had always been my inheritance, until I remembered something else. Weeks before the wedding, I'd ignored a string of messages from Avon. I scrolled through my phone now, fingers shaking, and found them. "If you don't help me with the down payment," she'd written, "don't expect me to hold back at the wedding. I swear I'll ruin it." There it was, not even subtle. I screenshot it, checked the timestamp. 2 days before the cake hit the floor. I forwarded the document and the messages to my attorney. 3 days later, I sat across from her at a firm downtown, the walls lined with certificates and soft leather chairs. She reviewed the files quietly, methodically, and finally looked up. "This isn't just family tension," she said. "This is power of attorney fraud, identity misuse, intentional emotional harm." "I'm not doing this to punish them," I replied. "I'm doing this to legally remember myself." The paperwork began. Later that night, I lit a fire in my fireplace, not for warmth, but to burn every last holiday photo album they'd sent over the years. I did it without theatrics, one page at a time. Quiet, like a funeral for the version of me who still believed family would someday feel like home. The grief was heavy, but this time, it felt clean, like clearing a wound before it could rot. I made tea, wrapped a blanket around myself, and sat in the quiet. The kind that wasn't isolating, just real. I didn't check social media. I didn't monitor fallout. Let them post what they wanted. I had already written the truth into legal record. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "They're planning a statement to flip this. Don't wait. You have less time than you think." It wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a race to the version that would survive history. The signature was dry before the ink settled in my stomach. I slid the pen back across the conference table and exhaled, quiet, steady, like a valve finally turned. Across from me, my attorney glanced over the papers one last time, then nodded. "You're clear," she said. "No more power of attorney, no shared titles, no lingering entanglements. This doesn't make you cruel, it makes you separate. There's power in that." I didn't smile, I didn't cry, I just nodded. I left the office and walked through the crisp downtown air with the sunlight filtering through palm trees. The legal package was in my bag, sealed, notarized, final. Before heading home, I stopped at the post office. I slid copies into pre-addressed envelopes and mailed them to Malis and Avon. No note, no explanation. They'd recognize the silence. It was almost too on-brand that just hours later, I got the notification. Avon had posted again. I clicked without hesitation. She was in a bakery this time, bright lighting, a pastel background, and a massive dummy cake staged behind her. She wore a glittering sash that read Sister of the Year in rose gold. With a dramatic wink at the camera, she tapped the cake and let it fall to the floor in exaggerated slow motion. "Some cakes," she said with a smirk, "are just too sweet to stand tall." She laughed. The music kicked in. The comments exploded. I stared at the screen, not because I was surprised, but because watching her monetize cruelty with such precision reminded me exactly why I'd walked away. Within minutes, the backlash began. A popular wedding brand that had once partnered with her dropped a statement. "We do not condone the mockery of personal events. We've terminated our agreement with Ms. Avon Holloway." Other companies followed. A photographer called her out for glamorizing sabotage. A makeup artist said she'd never seen a woman weaponize femininity so viciously. Still, I didn't post. Not yet. But then came a message. From Melanie Reyes, a family friend I hadn't heard from in years. "I just want you to know," she wrote, "we see you now. We really do." That was what made me open the box tucked away in my closet. Inside was the original blueprint I'd sketched for the cake. A paper replica of what I'd hoped for. Not just dessert, but dignity, celebration, something finally mine. I took a photo of the blueprint and posted it to my feed. Caption: "She thought it was just frosting. It was foundation. That was it." The response was immediate, quiet at first. Likes, private messages, supportive DMs. Then it grew. Comments started appearing on Avon's older posts. People questioning her behavior, asking if the story she told was really the truth. Others shared screenshots of past contradictions. Strangers called it out. "She mocked a wedding for clicks. Even for an influencer, that's low." I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched it happen. Without control, but not without impact. That evening, I sat in the kitchen, a candle burning on the counter. I didn't need company. I didn't need applause. I needed stillness. I had it now. Until the doorbell rang. A small brown envelope sat on the welcome mat. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It was of the cake, my cake, being delivered to the venue. And a sticky note attached. "You should know. She made sure your name wasn't on the order either." I stared at it for a long time. Turns out, the icing wasn't the only thing she planned to wipe clean. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter, unopened for hours. I already knew what it held. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably Milas's, deliberate cursive, as if style could smooth over harm. The weight of the envelope told me everything. Apology by form, guilt by thickness. I wasn't in the mood for either. Instead, I laced my sneakers and drove out to Salt River. The air was crisp, not cold, and the trail felt quieter than usual. No noise from my phone, no performance, just footsteps and the occasional breeze. It was the first time in months I'd done something purely for myself, without wondering who would twist it later. I paused on a bend overlooking the water. There was a stillness there that I hadn't known how much I missed. Maybe that was the scariest part about healing, realizing how long you'd settled for noise. When I got home that afternoon, I went through my old cloud albums, not out of nostalgia, but because I wanted to see myself clearly, without the version they told. That's when I found the video. It was from the wedding. A side-angle recording I didn't know existed, buried deep in a shared album. The clip was short. I stood near the dance floor, alone, watching as Avon took group selfies with my bridal party. No one looked my way. No one gestured for me to join. I didn't flinch or frown. I just adjusted my veil, sipped my champagne, and turned back inside. It wasn't the moment they left me out that hurt. It was realizing how easily they filled the space where I was supposed to be. I didn't delete the video. I saved it. That night, I removed every photo in my hallway frames. I replaced them with images I'd taken myself. Sunsets in Sedona, an empty bench at Watson Lake, a tree bent in two but still growing. I stopped framing memories of people who chose not to witness me. Maybe forgiveness isn't a bridge, maybe it's a boundary. The next day, Melis's voicemail came in around noon. "We don't have to agree on everything," she said, voice sugary soft. "But we're still family. That should count for something." I saved the message. I didn't reply. Astria sent a photo too. No text, just the old deed to the Sedona land, long since transferred to Avon. I stared at the image. I couldn't tell if it was regret or justification, and I realized it didn't matter. I didn't respond to him either. Instead, I opened a fresh journal and wrote a letter. Not to them, to me. To the woman who planned the cake, who wore the veil, who stood quietly when she should have screamed, who said "I do" to herself that day. When no one else had the courage to show up for her, you didn't lose your family. They chose a story where you didn't have a page. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush to answer it. I waited until the sound faded, until I finished my sentence. Then I walked to the porch and found a small brown package. Inside was a silver frame. It held the RSVP card I had mailed Malis 6 months before the wedding, the one she never mentioned receiving, the one I thought had disappeared. Now, scribbled across it in ink. I never meant to make you feel invisible. I held it for a long time, then placed it on the bookshelf, between a novel I never finished and a candle I never lit. But you did, and I finally learned that's not my burden to fix. The card stayed on my desk for 2 days. I didn't ignore it. I just let it sit there like an artifact, evidence of a version of me they were only just beginning to realize existed. I never meant to make you feel invisible. A scrawled afterthought on something I had once mailed with hope. That kind of sentence didn't deserve a reply. It deserved closure. So I chose to write my ending. The next morning, I walked into a downtown office building I hadn't stepped into since the early planning days of Avon's influencer career. The same lobby where I once waited with spreadsheets and PR pitches was still playing ambient jazz and still smelled like overbrewed coffee. I greeted the receptionist with polite detachment. When they asked the purpose of my visit, I handed over a flash drive in a small envelope and said, "This goes to your head of talent relations." Inside that drive, screenshots, emails, DMs, and the housing threat Avon sent weeks before the wedding. Proof of coordinated misrepresentation, monetized defamation, and a curated smear campaign disguised as content. I didn't include a letter. But when they asked if I had anything to add, I looked up and said, "I'm not here to cancel her. I'm here to correct the record. She can say whatever she wants, just not in my name." By noon, their legal department reached out to acknowledge receipt. By 4 p.m., Avon's page had dropped 2 brand partnerships. One beauty brand quietly removed a highlight reel. Another archived her recent campaign. No public statement, just the slow, quiet erasure that only corporate silence can deliver. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of mint tea and watched the first media blog post roll in. Influencer under scrutiny for alleged exploitation of family trauma. I didn't smile, but I didn't flinch either. There's a difference between revenge and resolution. This was never vengeance. It was a reroute. I drafted one last email, not to her, not to Malis, to my lawyer. Subject line, final steps. In the body, I outlined everything. The home deed transfer, lock changes, final disconnection from shared accounts. I attached a list of numbers to block, including every direct family contact. I asked her to file an official change of address and privacy hold. Then I walked barefoot to the mailbox with the form in hand. Peace isn't something they give you. It's what you decide not to return. The next afternoon, a new email notification appeared. From a woman I didn't know, a friend of my grandmother's. She had read my post about the cake blueprint and sent a quiet message. She always wanted you to live without waiting for anyone to notice you. I'm glad you finally do. Days later, a package arrived. Inside, a vintage cake topper, delicate porcelain, a single figurine, bride only. With it, a note. This one stands. I placed it on the top shelf in my kitchen, beside the tea set I had reclaimed, a line of framed landscapes I had photographed myself, and a potted orchid beginning to bloom. That night, as I prepared dinner, just pasta and garlic bread, nothing dramatic, my phone buzzed again. A photo. No message. Just the image. A wedding invitation. Avon's name in cursive. And on the reverse, a group photo. My face photoshopped among her guests. I hadn't been there. But there I was, smiling, placed like furniture in a scene I hadn't attended. Some people can't write their story without stealing yours. But I stopped being available for edits.